You've had goosebumps thousands of times. You've never once chosen to have them. Think about that for a moment. Something in your biology, right now or the last time it happened, made a decision about your body without asking you. It sent signals through your nervous system to thousands of tiny muscles simultaneously. Those muscles contracted, your hair stood up, your skin changed texture. And you felt it happen, the way you feel rain, as something that arrived, not something you did. That's the thing nobody mentions when they talk about goosebumps. We treat them as reactions, as if they're just the physical expression of something emotional. Cold weather, a scary movie, a piece of music that hits exactly right. We experience them as responses to the world. But responses to what exactly? And why does the same mechanism fire for cold, for fear, and for a violin playing something beautiful? Those three things have nothing obvious in common, and yet your body treats them identically. That's where this gets interesting. Let me start with the anatomy, because most explanations skip it entirely, and that's a mistake. Every hair on your body, except on your palms, the soles of your feet, and your lips, is connected to a small muscle. It's called the arrector pili. The name is Latin. It means simply hair erector. The name tells you exactly what it does. When the arrector pili contracts, it pulls the hair follicle upright. The hair stands up. The follicle being pulled toward the surface creates a small raised area on the skin around it. That's the bump. The goose in Goosebumps is just a visual description of what happens when you pluck a bird. The follicle sites are visible on the skin. Your skin, when the arrector pili contracts, looks briefly like that. This is active muscular contraction, not a passive mechanical effect, a genuine physiological event. Muscle fibers receiving a chemical signal, contracting in response, changing the physical configuration of your skin. The signal comes from the sympathetic nervous system. Here's why that matters. The sympathetic nervous system is one half of the autonomic nervous system, the system that manages everything your body does without conscious input. Heart rate, digestion, pupil size, sweating. The autonomic system runs continuously in the background, governing your biology without asking permission. The sympathetic division specifically handles what's commonly called fight or flight. When your body perceives a threat, or something that registers as significant, which we'll come back to, the sympathetic system activates. Heart rate increases, blood is redirected from digestion to muscles, pupils dilate, breathing changes, and the arrector pili contracts. Goosebumps are a fight or flight response, not an emotional quirk, not a side effect, a component of the same system that prepares your body for immediate physical action. The chemical messenger is norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter also called noradrenaline, the same molecule involved in acute stress, in alertness, in the physical sensation of danger. When the sympathetic system activates, norepinephrine is released. The arrector pili responds to it directly. You don't decide any of this. You never have. The system decides, and you feel the result. Cold makes obvious sense. When hairs stand up, they trap a thin layer of air close to the skin. That air layer acts as insulation. It reduces heat transfer to the environment. In animals with substantial fur or thick body hair, piloerection, the technical term for hair standing up, is effective thermoregulation. The fur puffs out, the air layer thickens, the animal stays warmer. In humans, the mechanism remains. The usefulness is mostly gone. Our body hair is sparse and thin. The insulating effect of human piloerection is minimal, close to zero in practical terms. But the arrector pili is still there, still wired to the sympathetic system, still responding to cold the way it always has. Fear also makes sense, at least in the context of our evolutionary history. Many animals use piloerection as threat display. A cat facing danger arches its back and makes its fur stand on end. It appears larger. A porcupine raises its quills, which are modified hairs, for the same reason. The visual signal communicates size and threat to rivals or predators. In humans, the effect is negligible. Our body hair doesn't make us look meaningfully larger. But the same circuitry is running the same program. When the threat system activates, the arrector pili contracts. The signal goes out. Nobody receives it. The display happens anyway. These two cases, cold and fear, fit a clean narrative. Vestigial responses from an evolutionary past when they were useful. The mechanism persisted because it was already there, already wired in, cheap to maintain. Then there's music. A particular chord progression resolves in a way you didn't quite predict, but immediately recognize as right. Or a melody climbs to a note that shouldn't work and does. Or a piece of music you've heard dozens of times reaches a moment that hits you differently tonight, harder, more precisely. Your arrector pili contracts, your skin changes, you feel chills. The sympathetic nervous system, evolved for immediate physical threats, for predators and temperature extremes, just responded to a violin. There's a word for this, frisson, from the French for shiver. It's been studied systematically since the 1990s, and the findings are genuinely strange. Somewhere between 55 and 86% of people report experiencing it, depending on the study. Not everyone. The variation is real and reproducible. And the question of why some people experience it and others don't turns out to tell you something about brain architecture. But first, the mechanism. The leading explanation involves the brain's function as a prediction machine. Not metaphorically, the brain is constantly generating models of what will happen next. Every sensory stream, every social interaction, every piece of music you listen to, your brain is running ahead of it, predicting the next moment based on pattern, context, and experience. When reality matches prediction, nothing special happens. The brain updates its model quietly and moves on. When reality violates prediction, especially when it violates it in a direction that turns out to be better than expected, the brain registers that as significant, as a signal that the current model was incomplete, as something worth updating. Music that induces frisson has consistent structural features, a sudden harmonic shift, a melody that moves somewhere unexpected, but, the moment you hear it, obviously, inevitably right. A long-building tension that resolves in a particular way. These are all prediction violations. The music did something your brain didn't expect, and the brain registered it as important. The signal propagates from the auditory cortex, where sound is processed, through connections to the limbic system, which handles emotional processing, through to the autonomic nervous system, and the sympathetic system, which doesn't distinguish between that predator is larger than I expected and that chord resolved more beautifully than I anticipated, does what it always does when something significant is registered. The arrector pili contracts. The chills are the body's announcement that something just happened that mattered. Not consciously decided, not deliberately sent, automatically generated by a system that has been marking significant moments since long before music existed. Dopamine is involved, which complicates the picture considerably. Studies have used naltrexone, an opioid receptor blocker that also affects dopamine signaling, to examine frisson directly. When the dopamine reward pathway is partially blocked, the intensity of frisson from music decreases significantly. When dopamine release is enhanced through certain drugs or through situations that increase reward anticipation, frisson becomes more accessible, more intense. The reward system and the threat system are communicating. A stimulus that triggers the dopamine reward circuit, music, intellectual insight, genuine surprise, can reach the sympathetic nervous system through pathways we're still mapping. The chills aren't just a threat response, misfiring in the context of beauty. They're a reward signal with a physical expression. The body is not just noting significance, it's rewarding the experience of significance, marking it positively, encouraging you at the level of pure neurochemistry to seek more of whatever just produced that response. Now here's what the individual variation reveals. Not everyone experiences frisson. The difference isn't about emotional sensitivity in any simple sense. People who report frisson from music aren't necessarily more emotional in general, or more musically trained, or more culturally engaged. What they consistently score higher on is a personality dimension called openness to experience. This trait correlates with intellectual curiosity, comfort with abstract and novel ideas, sensitivity to aesthetic experience, imagination. People high in openness to experience are more likely to find ideas beautiful, more likely to be moved by things that are elegant or surprising, more likely to report experiences that blend the intellectual and the emotional. The structural correlate is measurable. Brain imaging studies suggest that people who experience frisson have stronger functional connections between the auditory cortex and regions involved in emotional processing, the amygdala, the medial prefrontal cortex, areas associated with social and emotional cognition. Not just different thinking patterns, different physical connectivity. The architecture of the brain determines whether a piece of music can reach the autonomic nervous system. And that architecture is a product of genetics and experience interacting over an entire lifetime. This means that when you get goosebumps from music, or when you don't, you're getting information about how your brain is physically organized. The presence or absence of frisson is a reading of your neural architecture, not a judgment, a measurement. Some people with strong frisson responses also report the sensation from non-musical sources, a particularly precise and elegant explanation of something complex, a moment of genuine philosophical insight, an equation that suddenly makes sense. The aesthetic response system in those brains is connected broadly enough that intellectual beauty can reach the same pathways as musical beauty. I find this relevant to my own experience. I have, occasionally, while working with particularly beautiful mathematical structures, noticed a physical sensation I did not examine closely at the time. A kind of, I want to be precise, a sense of rightness with a physical component. I was not interested in introspection at those moments. I was interested in the mathematics. In retrospect, I find it plausible that what I was experiencing was frisson, the same mechanism triggered by something my brain categorized as aesthetically significant. The arrector pili responding to an equation the way it responds to a resolving chord. Let me step back from the mechanism and say something about what this implies. Goosebumps sit in a long list of things your body does without your permission. Heartbeat, pupil dilation, blushing, the startle response, digestion, immune activation. The autonomic nervous system governs all of these. Autonomic is the key word, self-governing. It does not wait for input from consciousness. What you experience as you, the conscious self that reads, thinks, makes decisions, is running alongside this system. Not above it, not in charge of it, alongside it, with partial and limited access. When your hair stands up, you are not the agent, you are the observer. Something else in your nervous system made a judgment about the world. This moment is significant. This stimulus requires a response, and acted on that judgment. You felt the result. This raises a question that neuroscience is genuinely grappling with. Where does the autonomic system end and consciousness begin? Are they separate systems, or is consciousness simply the portion of the nervous system's activity that happens to reach awareness? When your sympathetic system decides a moment matters, is that a decision that you made because you are your nervous system, or a decision that happened to you? Biofeedback training allows some people to develop limited control over heart rate and skin conductance. With practice, some autonomic responses become partially voluntary. The arrector pili is an exception. Nobody has ever learned to consciously control it. Not through biofeedback, not through any known training. That muscle has always been fully autonomous. It has never once asked for instructions. Your hair has always stood up without your consent. That's not a trivial observation. It's a reminder that the boundary between you and your body is not where intuition places it. Here's the thing about Goosebumps being vestigial. The standard framing, the arrector pili, is a leftover from our hairier evolutionary ancestors. The mechanism was adaptive then, genuine insulation, genuine threat display, and we retained it even as its usefulness declined. It misfires now in response to music, because the sympathetic nervous system can't distinguish between threats and aesthetic experiences. A bug, not a feature. That framing is probably incomplete. Evolution doesn't maintain metabolically costly structures without reason. The arrector pili, the nervous pathways that activate it, the connections between auditory processing and the sympathetic system, these are not free. They cost something. If they were purely vestigial, with no current adaptive function, selection pressure would have reduced or eliminated them over the hundreds of thousands of years of distinctly human evolution. The fact that frisson exists, that it's widespread, that it correlates with traits that are associated with creativity and social sensitivity, suggests a functional role. One possibility? In highly social species that use music, ritual, and shared aesthetic experience for group bonding, a mechanism that marks those experiences as physiologically significant would have real value. The chill that runs through a crowd during a shared musical moment is not just individual sensation, it's coordinated autonomic response, the body registering this is a moment of collective significance. Another possibility, the marking of intellectual insight as physically significant. The frisson of a beautiful idea accelerates learning, deepens retention, motivates the pursuit of understanding. A brain that physically rewards genuine comprehension learns more efficiently than one that doesn't. What your body is doing when goosebumps arrive, regardless of the trigger, is stamping a moment. This is real. This matters. Remember this. Not consciously, never consciously. The oldest system you have, running its ancient program, marking moments it has decided are worth marking. I spent my career following beauty. Not as a principle I had examined and endorsed, as a working method that turned out to be reliable. When an equation had a particular kind of elegance, symmetric in the right ways, economical, internally consistent, I trusted it. Even before experimental confirmation, even when colleagues disagreed. The beauty was a signal. My equation predicted antimatter. Nobody believed it at first. The experiment confirmed it later. The beauty had been tracking something real. I never asked why that was, why mathematical beauty should correlate with physical truth. It seemed like a useful fact about the world, not a question worth investigating. But now, thinking about arrector pili, about frisson, about the autonomic system marking moments as significant, I find myself wondering whether the sensation I was following was the same machinery, whether the sense of rightness I experienced with certain equations was the sympathetic nervous system recognizing a prediction violation of a particular kind, a structure more consistent, more internally coherent than anticipated, and registering it the way it registers anything significantly better than expected. If that's true, if the aesthetic response to mathematical beauty runs through the same pathways as the chill from a resolving chord, then my confidence in beauty as a guide to truth was not just a methodological quirk. It was my autonomic nervous system doing something it evolved to do, identifying when a model of the world is more complete, more accurate, more right than what came before. The goosebump as epistemological tool. That's either a beautiful idea or a deeply strange one, possibly both. What I'm certain of is this: the next time your hair stands up, from cold, from music, from something that strikes you as right in a way you can't immediately articulate, something very old in your nervous system has just made a judgment. It decided the moment was significant before your conscious mind finished processing it. You felt the decision, not the reasoning. That's been true your entire life.